So in any case, all the materials I'm going to talk about today are available at tbil.org. And so if you want to pull that up on your device now or later, you'll have access to that. And that should take you to our project website. And so I probably should at this point thank the NSF who has provided us an IUSE grant to do this project. The history of the Team-Based Inquiry Learning Project is that my colleague Drew Lewis and I, Drew Lewis formerly also of the University of South Alabama, found that we had a quality enhancement program at our institution for team-based learning. And so team-based learning is popular in the health sciences, and we got trained in it, and it kind of clicked with us that, oh, team-based learning is the scaffolding that would help us implement the 4 pillars of inquiry-based learning in our lower division classes, because we found that, at least, me, I grew up with the here's a sequence of theorems, good luck, sort of flavor of IBL. And I enjoyed it, but I was a future mathematician, and I really wanted to find a way to get that level of inquiry to my my calculus and my linear algebra courses. And so we found like the chocolate and the peanut butter of team-based learning and inquiry-based learning worked well together. And so if you go to the project website, I'm just going to show you around, and I'm going to dig into the resource library in particular. Brief description of the project on the front page. And if you want to know what TBIL is, first of all, it's an open source project, and we have a bunch of folks in the community. So thanks to Kate Owens, who created some slides that kind of give you an overview. If you're interested in coming dig into the weeds of the pedagogy of TBIL, not so much the resources that I'm going to show off today, then you can go through those slides available on that page. We have a community. There's about 50 or 60 folks have been trained in team-based inquiry learning. Thanks again to the MAA, because one of our workshops for the past 2 summers were funded by the NSF. This summer that we're wrapping up, we were part of the MAA Open virtual workshop series. And so if you want to get involved, you don't have to be trained, but I would encourage you to, there's a little survey that you can open. And just let us know if you're going to use anything, whether it's the activities or the exercises I'm going to show you in a little bit. And if you submit that survey, first of all, we'll know who's using this stuff, because we don't require you to let us know. It's open source. You can do whatever you want without telling us. But if you're kind enough to tell us that you're using it, we can tell our stakeholders at, say, the National Science Foundation that you're using this material. And if you're interested in the research behind this, we have a couple of publications. These are both before the NSF grant. We're still working through the data in terms of the faculty development aspects of our project, as well as the student implementation aspects of our project. And so we'll be posting the publications and posters on this What is TBIL page here. And of course, I should kind of just give you a mental picture of what the TBIL classroom looks like. It's nice if you have 6 tables or however many tables, each with their own whiteboard and their own computer. Folks have done this just turning the desks into each other. That's how I started doing this. And then eventually I just kept bugging people that I don't want to have to point my own webcam at me. I want my own fancy classroom with a Zoom camera and all the gimmicks. And eventually I got it. And so thanks to my institution for providing some more scaffolding for the in-person classroom experience. If you want to get trained in the future, like I mentioned those really quickly, I'll just point again that we had 2 NSF funded workshops. MAA Open partnered with us and allowed us to do back in June a virtual workshop, and I hope to offer some future workshops as well. So keep an eye on this page if you find this stuff interesting and want to actually go through a training for it. But what I wanted to show off today is the TBIL resource library, because what this is a completely free and open source resource library. You don't have to pay us anything. You don't have to log into anything. If you want to let us know that you're using the stuff through the survey, that's great. But I'm just going to show you off. I'm going to use linear algebra, but calculus is pretty similar in how it's set up. And so I'm going to go use linear algebra as this example. So if you go to, and the quick way to get to this, by the way, is linear.tbil.org. If you want to just type something in, and then it will redirect. It will redirect. Hey, there we go. And what you have is we wanted to create, one of the things that we found through this experience of going through this NSF funded project is that one of the major barriers to implementation is just resources, right? You can learn about the theory of inquiry-based learning or team-based inquiry learning or whatnot day in and day out. But if you don't have good, high quality activities to actually implement in your classroom, that's a lot of work. And if you don't have assessments that align with those learning outcomes, the way they were taught, it's just going to pile up. And so we wanted to give everybody an all-in-one package that you know, the issues with stuff like OpenStax and LibreText is that they're based on closed source software. So you have to rely on Elon Musk not buying them up and then changing their name to omega.com and charging $8 a month for a blue check mark. So we have everything up on GitHub. And so for any of these projects, all the underlying software, all the content, it's based on pretext. The exercise banks are based on a framework called Check It that I'll show you in a little bit. And if you're willing to read the documentation and go through this, you can rebuild this yourself. You're not relying on me to host it. However, I plan to continue hosting this for you so you don't have to, because nobody wants to, right? But I want you to know that it's all licensed. Every single part of the stack is something that you don't have to rely on me to maintain for you, but I plan to. So two things that are a part of our resource library is we have an activity book and we have an exercise bank. So I'll show you the activity book first. First of all, note that we put out editions every so often. And so we had an early edition and we just made a full 2023 edition. And it's available both in HTML and as a PDF. And it's because we're using pretext. So if you're interested in pretext or some of these other open source educational technologies, come by the exhibit hall. I'm here with the PROS Consortium, which involves pretext, web work, Donut, and Runestone Academy. And so we're very happy to kind of show you how all these different things can be wired together. And so that you can use full free and open source across the entire stack, educational resources. And so because I'm using pretext, I get for free a PDF and HTML version of the textbook. So if your students, I'm shocked how many of my students want to print stuff out. And so if they want to print out section 1.1, I don't have to make two separate versions of the book. You can see here the exact same content on the PDF or the web version. And so what we have provided for you in this activity book is a sequence of activities. And so I would probably zoom in so that I keep their eyes on one activity at a time. I guess I'll have to zoom out a little bit for this guy, because it's kind of a longer one. But here we can have, I define what a linear equation is. I might make a remark, give some other definition. It's the first day. You have a little bit of a content dump compared to other sections. But eventually I get to an activity here. And so all consistent linear systems contain a logical contradiction. Find the contradiction in this system that show that its solution set is the empty set. And that's where I step back and say, all right, folks, head to your whiteboards. And then your classroom looks like this. And they go to their whiteboards and they explore this activity together. And then I have them give me a simultaneous response that says, oh, we found out if we doubled this and added the equations, we got 0 = 12. And that's usually not true. And I'm like, great, awesome, you got it. And so you go through, and these are highly scaffolded definitions, facts, and activities. And the idea is that because of the many direct instruction that you give them and the context that you provide them with these facts and definitions, they're teed up to knock it out of the park for every activity. There is some inquiry. I mean, it's not like I'm telling you the answer and then you do the answer, right? But there is that scaffolding there so that you don't have this issue of if you have too much flexibility that the students don't even know where to start, right? So provide them the scaffolding so that they can engage in authentic inquiry, but then it's broken down for them a little bit to help lead them to that answer in a way that particularly we find useful in our context of, especially at my school specifically, it's mostly engineers taking the course, and they find they like doing the inquiry, but they have to have that scaffolding built up for them. At the end of the section, there is a video to kind of sum up. So this is one of the other issues, of course, with inquiry is what happens if you miss class, right? Well, I try and record and post that, but just watching the recording or if they log in through Zoom and watch the live stream, I sometimes will have a Zoom poll if it's a multiple choice question to get them engaged. And then we also have recordings of just kind of, the Cliff's Notes version of that content. And that's also really useful for review at the end of the day, because a lot of students will engage in the inquiry and they'll understand in the classroom, but then they just kind of have trouble with the mechanics when it comes time for their assessments. And then for linear algebra, we also have this in a proper slideshow version as well. And then also it's an open source project. So shout outs to my colleague, Jeff Ford, who actually has a more advanced version of linear algebra. It's mostly for math majors at his institution. And so he was like, oh, I really needed something a little bit higher up on Bloom's taxonomy. So he wrote some mathematical writing explorations and we incorporated them into the textbook because open source is awesome and we can work together to build great things. The other big thing I want to show you off about this library, and I find a lot of folks actually use this material just for the exercise things. And it's using a framework called Check It. This is something I created because, as was mentioned earlier, outcomes-based grading is awesome. It's a great way to help students value learning over grades, or at least students will you can't stop your student from caring about the grade, but it turns that conversation in, well, if I want a better grade, I've got to learn more, right? Because it's this very direct connection between what did you learn. I can explain why a matrix isn't in reduced row echelon form and put the matrix in reduced row echelon form, all right? Or at the end of the semester, I should be able to determine if a set of Euclidean vectors spans R to the n by solving an appropriate vector equation. And these are aligned directly with the sections of the textbook. So there's no context switching between when you're going through the inquiry-based team activities and then the problems that are aligned with those same learning outcomes. So we make sure that our scaffolding of the activities should lead students, and we typically have at least one activity, what we call a fluency builder, where they're solving a problem pretty similar to the kinds of example problems that they have through the Check It bank. And if you share the bank with the students directly, they get 20 versions of that problem, and they're wired up usually through multiple tasks. They'll have to see all the different possible ways that this could pan out, whether these things are spanning or not spanning and why. And then you as the instructor can assess them using problems that are generated in the exact same way so that you know that you're assessing exactly the outcome that they've been practicing through their practice problems, that you led them to learn through your activities. And that can be done by either including them on an assessment and using the assessment builder. Let's add another learning outcome. All right, I want 2 spanning sets questions and I want accounting solutions for linear systems problem in the middle just for kicks. And I can hit generate and I can keep hitting regenerate. You can see how I can make as many versions of this assessment as I want. And if you're running late for class, then it's really easy to make a quiz because you can just click that one button after you've generated and Wi-Fi though, right? There we go. Here we go. You got the question on a printable PDF. You can throw that to the printer and run off to class. The way I typically use these problems though, is I wanted to, in the philosophy of pretext, write once and use anywhere, but for exercises, I wanted exercises that could be used on paper, but also be used in a learning management system. And so we do have support. It is kind of, flaky. So I would recommend you do this just 1 or 2 examples at a time, but you can export to Canvas, Brightspace, Moodle. And again, I don't want you to have to rely on me for anything. So you're using your own actual learning management system, just using the built-in quiz feature of your learning management system that, somebody's paying for you, right? And you hit that export button and it takes a moment. I only did 2 outcomes, so probably maybe about 10, 15 seconds. Again, Wi-Fi. But eventually it's going to give me a zip file. There we go. And you just slurp that up into your Canvas or your D2L and it will give you a problem bank based on your native LMS features. And I think that might really be everything I had to say. If you find any of this stuff interesting, like I said, just go to tbil.org and you can click around to the resource library. I'd be happy to answer questions and thank you all for your time. Yes. Do you keep your teams the same throughout the course, or so team-based learning, unlike inquiry-based learning, is a very canonical sort of like inquiry-based learning has always been this big tent, and the history of team-based learning has been very regimented. If you look into the literature for team-based learning, so I've tried to follow that for many years. I'm actually going to try, and I think this is post-pandemic adjustment, is that because I always make sure that I have my Zoom available to students because I don't want anyone to ever feel obligated to come to my class when they possibly might be sick. Is I don't feel like ethically I can really do that kind of thing without making, and that's gonna, it just naturally just hurts attendance, right? A student rolls over and goes, I could shower and get to campus in 20 minutes, or I could just log into Zoom and just sleep in an extra 20 minutes, right? And so because now I have probably, 2/3 attendance instead of like, more like 90% attendance each day, I've decided I'm going to try doing daily randomized groups. And there is some literature I'm aware of that shows that visibly random daily randomized groups has benefits, at least in the K-12 setting. So I'm kind of interested to see how that plays out. But that's like I said, so what have I done? Always permanent groups, maybe switching it up at mid-semester due to attendance issues. But I am going to try it randomized in the fall. Yes. What's coming next for this project? We want materials for more courses. And so we have some folks that have been trained in TBIL, and we have some funding to continue to train those folks to create new materials. For pre-calculus is in particular one of the big ones. I think we have some folks. I was getting ready for Mathfest, so I haven't actually looked through the proposals people brought into me, but we have about 8 or 9 folks that said they wanted to develop materials over the course of the next academic year. I'm pretty sure pre-calculus and differential equations are on the radar. Yeah. Yes.
So can you say in a few words how team-based learning is different from inquiry-based?
So team-based inquiry learning is a particular implementation of inquiry-based learning. So we believe in the same 4 pillars of IBL that you saw walking into this room. It is just a mechanism to implement it in your classroom. And so inquiry for us happens in these activities. So they come into class, and in this section, we don't talk at them very much until we get them to dive into an activity. And the idea is that it's a scaffolding. We do have this thing called the 4S structure. I didn't want to get too far into the weeds, but the 4S structure is we always have all teams work on the same problem. It has to be a significant problem. They have to have a specific choice they have to make. And so that's one thing that we were shocked is that actually I do a lot of multiple choice questions, because I found that if I gave them the multiple choice, then there was still a lot of inquiry going on. In fact, there was more inquiry going on because at least they could rule something out, right? You give them this big open problem, and then they don't even know how to start. And so that was a great way to kickstart those conversations that, well, I know it can't be 0 because X, Y, Z. So could there be more than 1? That kind of thing right there. And then finally, simultaneous response. We want all the teams working on the same problem. They all reveal at the same time, so they're all motivated to complete that same activity. And then we are all able to move on together and keep on pace with the inquiry as a class. Thanks.